Hi there. I want to welcome you today to an episode of Seeking Voices of Health, Healing, and Hope. I'm your host, Dr. Monica Agarwal. I'm a preventive cardiologist who focuses on nutrition and lifestyle to heal illness. I also have a chronic illness. Over the years, as a nutrition specialist, as a cardiologist, as a patient, I've met so many people who feel sad, stuck, hopeless, and confused. There's so many people looking to understand their lives, their purpose, the meaning of things, and they are struggling. We are struggling as a society, as humans, as women, as moms, as patients, as husbands, as children. I wanted to start this podcast to bring voices to people of hope and health and healing, but also to share how people have overcome their sadnesses and their struggles and their pain. I think we have so much to learn from each other, not always from people in the limelight, but sometimes from the people around us, living the day-to-day, drudging through, overcoming, and being. I hope this podcast makes people consider other people more deeply. It allows people to consider themselves more importantly, and reminds us all to have hope and look for the joy and happiness in the day-to-day. This is my hope. My next guest is a man named Kyler Pettry. Kyler's a fabulous person that I've been lucky to know. I met Kyler as my massage therapist. He's given me the best massage of my life, by the way. He quickly became my friend and someone that I've learned so much from. What I love is that the person that I met is hardly the person that I know now. Kyler has been many things in his life: a massage therapist, an artist, a minister, an unrepentant nerd, and an aspiring academic/theologian. He is the go-to friend for so many and knows more about more things than the smartest people that I know. Each person is an onion. They have multiple layers. Sometimes we only see the outside layer and we can make decisions and judgments on that layer, but it takes time to see the layers inside, and there's so much color in there. There's so much to learn from. So I hope you will join us. Here I'd like to introduce Mr. Kyler Pettry.
Well, good morning, Miss Monica. And with that intro, you're already getting me misty, so thank you.
Well, it's true. It's my pleasure to have you, and it's just always a pleasure to talk to you. And I miss you not seeing you in Gainesville. So Kyler and I know each other from Gainesville, Florida, and I actually asked him when I moved to Orlando how often he'll come to Orlando to give me a massage.
It hasn't happened yet, but it's mainly because I hate to drive and I haven't been able to go to Disney yet. So
it's probably better this way. I don't want to, maybe a bad massage and then I'd be disappointed.
Right. Oh, okay. Well, now I'm insecure.
Okay, Kyler, it's so great to have you here. It really is a pleasure. I wanted to start by asking you some questions about your life, because I know who you are today, but and you're this cool guy with this amazing boyfriend, and you're studying to be a theologian, or you're getting your PhD, and but you didn't start this way. Like, you didn't start as somebody who had yourself together the way you did. Like all of us, we were a lot of fragmented, confused. So I guess I'd ask you first, like, how would you describe who you are today? I mean, what makes you you? What characteristics or adjectives would you use?
Okay, so we're going to start out strong out of the gate. That was a good right hook. So that's really difficult because one of the things that always surprises me is like that the irony of subjectivity. You see me in this way, but I don't necessarily see me this way. And I think that's, really true for most of us. Like, what we project is not what we experience. Adjectives that I would use to describe myself: scattered, hopeful, not nearly as confident as people say I project, confused, sometimes scared, but also determined and petty. Like, what I mean by that is I see myself as somebody who tries. And I think that's all any of us can ever do, is try. Certainly in the world today, it's that's all you can do in the face of all the negativity that we deal with. So I like to think I'm funny, and uh, even when I don't mean to be, which is sometimes the funniest bit of all. So
I like in particular what you said at the beginning, because it's so true. The person, you also have said that to me before, where you've said things, well, this is who you are, and this is who I see you as. And I kind of want to laugh and almost like, who is that person? Because that's not the person that I see, right? And so much of the time, the person that we see isn't necessarily who we project. And there's that disconnect. And part of that's because of our own insecurities, don't you think?
absolutely. I think we see the world through, we've all heard that phrase, rose-colored glasses. Well, those glasses aren't just rose-colored. Your emotions, your insecurities, your biases, all of that, your perspective is how you see the entire world. And when I see Monica, I see this powerful, determined, brilliant woman
Oh boy.
who has, oh no, it's turnabout. You did it. You did it. You made me misty. So you just buckle in. Okay. Um, this incredible human being who gives herself no slack whatsoever, runs herself to the ragged edge because she doesn't know how not to be the best kind of extra. I have been described as also extra. I don't see it. Most of the time I think of myself as lazy. And then my friends look at me like, are you insane? Like you just worked for like 12 hours. Rest. I'm like, I can't rest. I have like this list. It's like that list will be there tomorrow. But that's the thing. I think highly effective people, and I'm not putting myself in that list, by the way. Um, I think highly effective people all suffer from that. Like there's so much to do in this life and there are only so many days to do it. They want to get that and 10% more done and still feel not completely accomplished. And
It's so funny that you say that, because my one of my most important tasks for myself is actually to focus on the calming, the relaxing, the slowing down. So, you've hit the nail on the head, which is that I continue to go, go, go. But the part is to not be the cheetah, right? To always, I mean, not to be the guy who doesn't, but to be the cheetah who rushes, but then also takes that break and takes that time to recover. And so much of my own healing has been because of that time that I've taken for that recovery. But it's very easy to slide back. It's very
yeah,
easy.
not to make that comment in any way about myself, but it's nice to be heard sometimes because I feel some advice being echoed back right now, just a little bit.
Okay, so tell me. So I've known you now for years, I guess maybe 5, 7 years, 5, 6 years
Oh, yeah,
probably.
6 years. Wow,
6 years. That's
6 years.
crazy. That's
That's
crazy.
insane.
It is. And it's always such a pleasure to talk to you. And the person, as we've said, is, I do see that self-assured, confident person. So, and you say you don't necessarily see that about yourself, but let's go back even to further. Like, how did you start? And if we could start a little bit, and if you could bring up as you talk about, because you identify yourself as a gay man, and I'd love to hear a little bit about your childhood. And it must have been hard to grow up as a gay child in rural Florida. Like, what was that like? And then how does that young, guy who's trying to figure out who he is in a town like you grew up in, then come out to be you, like so confident with who you are. And, I'm always, you've told me before, oh, I knew I was gay when I was 6 years old, or, tell me a little bit about some of those things.
Ooh, okay. That's chunky. Um, so I knew that I was very different. Now, I lived a sheltered life. I grew up in the country. We were miles away from the nearest. It had two stoplights. Okay, I want to give Williston credit. Williston, Florida, and Levy County had two whole functioning stoplights and an extra blinking one out towards 441. It was a small town, and in a small town, certain attitudes prevail. I was sheltered, and because I was sheltered, I knew that I was different, and I knew that there were things about me that people wouldn't like, but I didn't know exactly what it was at that young age. As I grew older, I knew I had a secret. Um, that is a really heavy burden for a child to know that if you have this secret, most children can't keep secrets. I mean, if you've been around a 5-year-old, there's parents know, don't say anything you don't want your child to repeat. And that's because kids, it comes out like everything that they hear gets regurgitated. Imagine the pressure of holding that secret, and especially a secret that you know if it comes out, you would be ostracized for, you would be in trouble. So growing up, it was hard. It was very hard. Also, it made it very difficult to connect. I was an awkward child. I had really bad, you described me as confident and self-assured. The reason I will probably never see myself that way is because I wasn't. I was terrified to be around people. I didn't know how to talk to people. I was either too much or too quiet. By middle school, I tried not to talk to people because even the people I considered friends, I I didn't know how to navigate those relationships. I didn't know what was appropriate and what wasn't. And by that point, I knew what gay was. I knew that boys weren't supposed to like other boys. The fact is, though, I would look around and I would see my friends and I'm like, wow, he's pretty. He's by the time those feelings began to develop, I had no roadmap for how to deal with them. Straight kids have, and I also didn't really have much of a father figure either. So I didn't have anybody teaching me how to be a man, how to be a guy, how to navigate any of that. And so I think that's also an issue that's pretty predominant in the gay world now, is that disconnect between a father figure that can teach you what it is to be a man, or however you choose to identify those archetypes, those templates. We're missing such an integral part of that. Um, by the time I was in middle school, I was already chunky. I was already overweight. I wanted to not be that. I would have possibly even liked sports, but the idea of being on a team was terrifying. By the time I was in high school, I was probably one of the oddest kids in my school. And by probably, that's a definite. Everybody knew who I was, not just because of my family, which is basically redneck mafia. I mean, we're the proudest kind of hillbilly. Everybody knew who my family was. Um, the school knew me. I painted the mascot in our gym. Um, the gay pagan kid painted the giant red devil, which in a town as Southern Baptist as Williston, Florida, that drew some comments. I was mentioned in a couple of tent sermons. That was fun. I felt famous and slightly targeted. Um, listen, it's Florida. People are armed. You have things to worry about. Different can be difficult.
Why do you think you were so terrified to join a team, or because that wasn't, or was it because you were sort of hiding so much of who you were? Yeah. And so you were worried that that would come out?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's when you're hiding a secret, it feels like you're hiding every secret, especially when you don't have life experience. I was a young teen. I knew that I was hiding a secret by the age of 11. My whole world was secrets. I got to a point where I had to be alone because being around people was so difficult. It's certainly in the light of where we are today with like Florida's Don't Say Gay bill and things like that. It's the reason people react to being forced back into the closet or to have our topics removed from the main stage is because that was my life. Kids who grew up in the 90s who couldn't come out, like today, kids can come out. We've made that relatively safe as compared to yesteryear. I didn't have that. If I came out, it would have been on every mouth, every set of lips in Levy County. And I mean, people knew, people talked. Years after, when I did come out, I would run into friends and they would find out I was gay. Like, I had no idea. And I'm like, how did you not know? Like, one, I'm pretty flamboyant. I can't help it. My mannerisms, most people can clock the fact that I don't date a lot of women from a mile away, but some people just didn't see it. That was always a surprise to me because I thought everyone knew. And that's the thing. You think people know, but they're not talking about it. It's this wall of pressure and anxiety all the time. And it's anytime you're around people. And even when you're not around people, you're thinking about it.
So when did you start telling people or feel comfortable enough to tell people that you were gay?
Um, well, at first I started as bi because that was more, somehow bi was more acceptable. I was to find out later that bi people don't feel that way because it's very difficult for bisexual people to sometimes form relationships without fear and anxiety and insecurity with their partner and everything. It's I think so.
Explain that a little bit. You mean like somebody might worry that they find the other sex more attractive, or?
Well, the problem is that insecurity isn't limited to the LGBTQ community. Heteronormative people, cisgendered people are also rampantly insecure. Our culture, our society does not teach confidence, not self-assuredness and confidence. It does teach toxic cockiness, like that kind of, we talk about toxic masculinity, but that's a phrase that's been thrown around. But really, our culture teaches either rampant insecurity or a malignant overconfidence. And it's unfortunate, but there's really very little middle ground. The number of healthy people that I meet, either in my massage practice or just in life, is relatively small. The insecurity of having a partner who likes both genders is a lot for most people, because if they're checking out other women, you can spot that. If they're checking out other men, you can spot that. But if everybody around you is a potential threat to the happiness of your relationship, and that's one of I think that fear is also one of the things you see in the relationship turnover within the LGBT environment too, where our identity is rooted in our sexuality, and so hypersexuality has been this focus for so long. And I think that pressure has ruined a lot of potentially really great relationships.
Well, that's a very interesting thing to say. I'll have to think about that, the hypersexuality comment. And I think I think about your process, and I think about where you've gone, and I still have gaps. Like, I still don't understand. So, okay, so you considered yourself bi, and then where did you go from there? Like, how did that evolve?
I met a friend. Her name was Shannon, and Shannon was one of the strangest human beings I've ever met. She was, but wonderful in a unique way. Shannon was funny and misunderstood and acted out for attention. And it was in those outcasts that I found my comfort. They were also outcasts. We didn't judge each other. We were pithy, we were quippy, we made jokes, but we weren't the kind of awful abuser to one another that we experienced from everybody else. And she was probably the first person that I told. I remember she was like, "That's so cool," and I was nearly having a panic attack. It would be another 2 years before I really decided, you know what, I don't like women, and I don't know why I ever thought I liked women. I've never been even in the most remotest fashion attracted to women. There has never been a single point in my life. I once had a Cindy Crawford, a young Cindy Crawford poster in my room. That poster was 100% a beard. Like, I thought she had a very pretty face, and I liked the airbrushing on it, but it was not because I was attracted to Cindy Crawford. I officially came out as gay to my friends in the end of my junior year, beginning of my senior year. And by officially, I mean like 3 or 4 people.
In high school, you're talking about?
In high school. And then a year after I graduated, my mom, who was, she worked with the Alachua County Sheriff's Office, she was injured and she had to undergo spine surgery. And it was a rough procedure, and she was in a bad way afterwards. And when you're afraid you're going to lose your mom, you have all these things come up. One, I'd been living a lie, and I'd wanted to tell her, because my mother has always been so supportive. I found that I could not face a world where I didn't tell her one of the most important things about me. And it took me 2 weeks. When I say that I worried a hole right through the lining of my stomach, like, I was a basket case. Nobody knew what was going on. My sister was just like, "I don't know what's wrong with you, but you need to sort it out," because I couldn't behave like a normal human being. I was so nervous. And then,
So nervous to tell her, like you were building up.
Right.
Yeah.
I was more nervous about telling her than about the spine surgery that she was going through. It was like,
enough about you, Mom. Let me talk to you about me.
yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, it's a 6-hour surgery on your spine. Yeah, that's enough about you. So it was like the day after, it was the day after she came home. She's laying in bed. The painkillers were doing their work. And I
Perfect
walked
timing. Good timing.
If you knew
Nice
my
done.
mom, you would know that no, not really. There's no substance that could keep her from reacting emotionally. I love her, but she's an excitable woman. Um, I walked into her room, wringing my hands. I was so nervous. I still remember my fingers were cold and my hands were clammy, and I was terrified. And this is a woman who's never shown me anything but love and support. Okay. Um, I looked at her and said, Mom, I got to talk to you. And she's like, what is it, son? And Mom, I like, I like guys. And she looked at me. One eye was a little bit more shut than the other because opiates are powerful. And then she said, so? And then rolled back over.
Oh,
I
oh my
listen
gosh.
for 2 weeks. For two
That's
weeks,
amazing.
okay. It was great, but like for 2 weeks, I was insane with anxiety. And I'm like, so are you I can't say the word that I said, on a
Like
podcast,
you
but
felt like she didn't honor you enough by like
oh no,
responding?
it wasn't even, listen, I was not honored enough is way more of a complicated emotion or thought than I was having at that point. I was like WTF, but with way worse language. I was like, what do you mean so? I just came out and you said so? And she rolls back over, completely over the conversation. And she said, Kyler, I have known that you were gay for years. First, I'm the one who puts your laundry away. If you wanted to keep a secret like that, you should have hidden those tape boxes in the top of your closet a little bit better. Because when they fall on my head, it's hard to ignore, as is the picture on the cover. And at that point, I'm bright red because once upon a time I was a full-on ginger, and when we blush, it looks like we're having a heart attack. So I am a cherry tomato. And she's like, also, you're my son. All I want is for you to be happy. Now, and she patted my hand. I see that you're distraught. So whenever I've had a nap and you've had a chance to calm down, we can talk more. Okay, love you. And then rolled back over and went to sleep. And it was wonderful. It was I went to my room and I cried,
I'm
like
sure you did.
ugly cry, like the most hideous crying. Okay, like tears were coming out of my eyes like super soaker streams. And a few hours later, she gets up, wasn't supposed to be out of bed, but got up and went to go do laundry because there was no laundry to do, but she did it. Um, and then we talked about it and cried a little bit more. And then over time, um, she helped me have the conversations with my family. Like she helped with that. She broached with my Aunt Linda. We told my Aunt Linda over Chinese food. And funniest day, we tell her Aunt Linda's over there having apoplexy because she's a serious Christian and very devout. And of course, that means gay is bad. And then I got a fortune cookie that said, if you've got it, flaunt it. And I cracked up. Linda did not find it funny. My mother thought it was hilarious. Yeah. And then I had an uncle who refused to believe it. Uncle Austin said, oh, Kyler's no more gay than I am. And I was like, well, then you have secrets and you should unburden yourself. And yeah, I didn't say that directly to him because he didn't have a sense of humor. But I mean, he did, but it was odd. It was quirky. I never understood it. I still have not had any kind of official conversation with the rest of my uncles because they're really good shots and I don't run super fast. So we're just gonna keep that on the QT. All the aunts know.
But
It
how
was
do
a
you think your mom, I mean, I find that interesting because all of her siblings, maybe devout Christian, you said sort of wouldn't be okay with, the whole gay thing is considered taboo or whatever. Why do you think your mom is so awesome? Just because she is, huh? Like what made her
yes.
be different? Because what made her be different? Because it was her son probably, but do you think that she was just different in general than the rest of your aunts and uncles?
I think she's generally different. So my mother worked in law enforcement. She's worked in prison. She's gone through that whole thing. She was also a nurse. you see a lot of different people. Now, certainly there are lots of people who work in those professions who are not open-minded, but my mom has always kind of identified herself as a rebel. And as a rebel, she rebels against everything. She's the most contrary human being I've ever met in my life. And I know I'm using a lot of like superlatives here, but like, meet the woman. She is not normal. Um, she bucks anything. As soon as somebody says you should do something, she is taking the left turn at Albuquerque. She has no time for what she should do.
That's where you get your fire from.
Yeah, yeah. One of these days, my partner is a psychologist. I know one of these days he's going to pull out his DSM and he's just going to read off the personality disorders that I have, and I'll be like, "That's mom. That's mom. That's mom." It's like, no, that's Aunt Camille, but that's mom. Yeah, it's a thing. But yeah, no, she raised some very opinionated children. My sister is basically me, but female, and it's interesting. We're such the same person that we argue nonstop.
It's amazing. And it's amazing that, and I love that because, if I were to use my glasses and my stereotypical glasses, that could happen in a moments of weakness to any of us, where we would say, okay, look at this person, you could easily get this such a different perspective. And this is sort of why I wanted to do this, because I love that you're not any stereotype. You're so cool, and you just have all these layers. And I just think that that's super cool. So I appreciate you talking about that. You don't mention your dad. Is that something you could talk about? Was he supportive or?
Well, okay. So my birth father, he left my mom when I was 3, and the normal ring of jokes that I would use around this, masking pain, is probably not appropriate for a podcast. So I'll keep it to a more objective description. So he left when I was. Okay, so my dad was a trucker and my stepmother's name is Bunny. So you do the math. Okay. By the age of 8, he was out of the picture. He hung around for a while, but that pesky child support was real difficult for him to manage. So my mom met another man by the name of Johnny. He wanted to adopt me and my sister. I'm not entirely sure why he wanted to adopt us. So my birth name was actually Terry. It wasn't Pettry. And I don't know why he wanted to adopt us. I think it was as an act to try and get closer to my mom. He certainly cared a great deal about my sister. I was the odd person out. I wasn't the easiest child, I don't think. But on top of that, like I said, you didn't have to be psychic to know that I had a secret. And he didn't really like that all that much. We didn't get along, and whenever he was there, I was very unhappy. Johnny definitely contributed to years of depression.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the father figure, but he was then the second father figure who rejected me. So that really reinforced the sense that there was something inherently wrong with me. And I think that as an LGBT person, and certainly going into talking about weight and being gay in the South, the idea of rejection is pervasive. There is something wrong with us. That's why people don't understand why gay people have to have pride parades. We have to have pride because the rest of our culture told us that we should be ashamed. We have to have pride parades because we have had to teach ourselves that we have even the most basic value that regular straight people have just because they're straight, regardless of the fact that some of the greatest names in history have been gay, lesbian, and transgender. Some of the greatest conquerors in history. I'm old enough to know how little, I'm old enough and well enough versed in history to know how little our world actually knows, specifically our culture knows about the contribution of people like myself. We have pride because other people told us we shouldn't.
Oh, it's so beautiful. It makes me think about so many things, and that's beautiful and so important because, and then it sort of makes you kind of, maybe for people who don't understand pride and the need for pride, there's a lot of people who would say this gay movement has gone too far, or I've heard that, or that people are too comfortable talking about gender fluidity, the movement. Children are identifying themselves more often as some level of some part of the LGBTQ movement. How would you speak to that? Because it sounds to me, if I follow that gender, that pride movement, it's like, damn it, like finally, it sounds like finally, like let's be, extra, or because we haven't been able to be. Is that the right thing that you would say, or?
So one, thank you for going further into this topic. You do not have to get me a Christmas gift. That is a present.
But can you still get me a Christmas gift?
If I'm still living in the state of Florida, I will make a trip. It's such a big topic. I just want to make sure that I approach it in something of a linear manner and not a spider web of tangents. So the gay movement has gone too far. I love that. Can't talk about it because kids are now identifying as. The very idea of that is so deeply rooted in the insecurity of people who have never had to question themselves. The very moment where you tell somebody else that they're not allowed to hear something, you are censoring their experience and diminishing their opportunity to grow past where they are. The Don't Say Gay bill. The idea of teachers outing students because the student trusted them enough to share something that was deeply personal and potentially harmful to them. And that teacher has to out them regardless of abuse, abandonment, or neglect. The very concept of this is the cruelest aspect of our culture. It is awful. The gay movement has gone too far. The gay movement isn't a gay movement. The gay movement is people saying enough is enough. And let me tell you, there are problems with that movement. I'll be the first one to tell you that. People of color and their roles within that movement have been systemically repressed. And as usual, white people take all the credit. There are aspects of that culture which I believe, are inherently toxic. But we are exactly the movement that their society birthed. You don't like us? Change yourselves, but you refuse to change. You want us, the people that you have neglected, the people that you have turned away, dismissed, or told were wrong. You want us to change who we are and then keep completely quiet about it because you don't want to hear about our journey. You want to force us back into this closet that you created, where we live every moment of every day terrified. And then you have the audacity to say, but you can't even talk about it. No. That doesn't work for me, and that doesn't work for any of my brothers and sisters. It does not work for me. We need our children to know about Alan Turing and Alexander the Great. We need to speak the poetry of Oscar Wilde. We cannot live inside that space of fear and isolation because it is not right. It is not right. We are people. We deserve to be free. And here's the best part. You can't take that freedom away from us because you made a mistake. You made us strong. You made us resilient, and we may be neurotic as hell. But guess what? I like neurotic people. They get things done.
Wow. Woo. That was awesome. I loved it. I know. Woo. That was amazing. I loved what you said, and I want every child to hear that because it can't be considered too far, or whatever the words I've been hearing recently as I approach this topic. And I'm just so glad you said that.
Yeah.
Whew, okay, I'm going to switch topics on you a little. Okay. All right. So I know this has already been a heavy conversation. Yeah. We're all going to go out and get a stiff drink. So tell me about the weight. You alluded to it a little bit, and I know about your journey with the weight. I know that that's been something that you've struggled with, and tell me about it. Like, what's it like to be overweight? And do you think your weight was a response to so much of your angst as a child? And how have you, how do you just feel about that weight that you have? And how do other people respond to you because of your weight? Some of those kind of thoughts.
Well, I love that we're moving from a heavy topic to the topic of heavy. That's a bit of synchronicity that I love.
That's
Um,
right. I planned that.
you sure did. It was very smooth.
Oh.
Best transition. It's like listen, Seth Meyers, you need to watch this podcast. Um, so oh, that's again chunky. Again irony.
I know,
So
pun intended.
yeah, putting ching. Um, I was a drummer in high school, actually. I was the worst drummer that ever lived. I did that instead of PE because I was afraid of changing in and out in the locker room with the other boys. Love the music, but still, I can't even play Hot Cross Buns, which is like the first song you learn. It's really bad. So to say that I grew up around unhealthy eating habits, all right, obesity is an epidemic in the South, all right, diabetes is an epidemic. So I grew up with not great food habits anyway. Also, we were poor. We always had access to food because family was always, able to help us, and we grew up on a farm, so I never did without. But I didn't always have the best, and it's the South, so I had to learn to cook with olive oil. I can deep fry chicken and a pork chop. I can do all those things very, very quickly. I grew up knowing how to make biscuits from scratch and all of that. Um, General rule of thumb, my mom said, if this is before I came out, she's like, if your woman don't know how to make biscuits and gravy, don't you bring her up to the home place because they're gonna tear her up. And it's true because our society here functions so much around food. Our gatherings are all around food. Food is a contest. It's a social culture. I mean, each person in my family has one or two dishes that are their specialties, and when there's a special occasion, that's what they bring because they do it better than anybody else, but they still compete. It's wonderful.
I mean,
I
that's part of the beautiful thing about the culture,
mhm,
about the Southern culture is the sitting and eating, and
oh
it's
yeah,
one of the greatest parts.
right. I mean, it's a school of piranha, but yeah, it's a great school of piranha. In the South, we have this thing, and this is not a tangent. This goes directly into the obesity. We have a culture of what's called nice nasty. It is this beautiful expression of cutting humor. I call it acidic, but acid doesn't do this kind of damage. It was once described to me by one of my aunts that a true lady can invite you over for tea, and you've driven halfway home before you realize you're bleeding because she has cut you, and all she ever did was compliment you. I mean, can you think of anything more negative and more destructive? Like at that point, you've not only insulted them, but you've also managed to remove their ability to take a compliment. And if they do get a compliment, wonder how they've been insulted. Like,
Oh, God.
I mean, it's this wonderful recipe for an entire culture of cognitive dissonance. It's wonderful. Kind of also explains politics today. They're programmed. Um, I grew up around people who couldn't give a compliment and couldn't give support without there being some kind of backhanded statement with it. Um, More than that, I grew up around people who were very judgmental, very opinionated. Southern culture has an opinion about everything, and the less they know about it, the better. Most people in the South who have opinions really aren't that educated on the topic, but they feel a way about it, and so they have an opinion, and they'll share that opinion, but not directly. It's taken me years to recognize exactly how all of that impacted me. Between that and so I was a very high functioning kid. I've recently been diagnosed with fairly severe adult ADHD, and that rocked my world because it immediately went back to all of those issues. I always thought that I was depressed and overate because I was gay, but threaded through all of that was this sense of, and this is not something you and I've ever talked about before because this is a very recent development. This sense that I had failed, that everything that I did was wrong or wrong in some fundamental way. And that was because there was very little support, a lot of criticism, and I was always getting in trouble for things that I didn't understand why I was getting in trouble. And now looking back on it, I recognize that no, I didn't hear what they told me. I wasn't able to focus on that. I was distracted by something. My mom says that I was a great kid, and I like to think that I was. I know that I was kind and compassionate, and I talked to people, and I loved listening to people, and I remember those memories of me as a child. But then they were very incongruent when I listened to my aunts speak specifically. Sadly, sometimes very severe women. Um, I was a bad kid. I've literally been told, I have been told Kyler was a bad kid. He could not listen. And with not listening came spankings. Um, I remember getting whippings a lot as a child because I didn't listen. Or as school went on, I didn't know what an F was until the fourth grade. I literally had to ask my aunt, "What's an F?" And I will never forget. She looked at me, and my aunt looks like Kathy Bates. So understand that when she pins you with a stare, she has you. You're not getting away. That eyebrow came up and she said, "Well, Kyler, an F is what happens right before you die." And I was like, okay. And I did not ask further. I looked it up at school. I talked to a teacher and I found out what an F was because I didn't know. I knew it was part of the grading scale, but I didn't know what it meant. F for failure. I'd never had that. Very shortly after that, though, that was to change, and I got my first F, and then I got a second F. And as the ADHD got worse, or I got into more and more complicated things, I love to read. I was very high functioning, but there were certain things that I could not excel at, and then that fed into I have a secret. And as a child, you're not able to cognitively parse all of this. All you know is that everything you touch, everything you do is bad. And then that fed. And so the more and more I was alone and I wanted to be alone, mom was working nights, mom was working to support us because dad had left. My sister was off with our cousins, actually developing social skills. I was at home and I wanted to be at home. I wanted to be alone. And the more I was alone, the more depressed I was. And the more depressed I was, the more I wanted to be alone. And, at home, when there's nobody watching, those bad eating habits get even worse. Um, when I graduated high school, I swore that I was going to lose weight. And I did. I lost 120 pounds on the low carb diet, which I felt great. And by I felt great, I meant it was a really unhealthy thing to do. And I still felt fat. Like I was skinny enough that I could wear a lycra shirt, had no love handles. Everything was where it was supposed to be. And I looked in the mirror and I was like, I look fat. And my friend at the time, Brad, looks at me. He's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, I'm like, "Look at this. This is fat." And he's like, "That's like skin. Like you're not even like loose skin. Like I had like a V shape and I was still fat." And I recognized in the back of my head, I'm probably always going to be fat. Like in my head, I'm always going to be the fat kid. Um, and even to today, like I lost that 120 pounds. As soon as I left the low carb diet, started packing it back on, and then I packed on more than I had lost before. Um, yeah. And as far as how people reacted, when I was 9 or 10, we went to Henry Beck Park, and Beck Park was this lovely little stream. And I remember sitting playing in the sand, and my Aunt Emily was on the beach, and she looked at me, and by that point I had hit a growth spurt and I had some stretch marks on the back, my like my flank, my back, lower back. And that was because I'm pale. I'm like the palest white man in America. Give me a laser pointer and I can land a 747 in a snowstorm. It's bad. She looked at me and she said, "Kyler." Mm. That was the last time I voluntarily went swimming without a shirt on, because I was being watched. I had been seen and I had been judged. And to this day, I'm not comfortable going swimming without a shirt. I'm just now at this point, I love to swim. I love to be in the water. Now to this day, still can't. I can't be without a shirt. And, I've lost a lot of weight. I'm 11 pounds away from losing 100 pounds. And I'm in the gym, and a lot of what I have now is not even fat. Like I'm more muscular. I'm healthier now than I have ever been in my life. I'm moving now. True, when I go to the gym, I'm basically just moving large amounts of weight, about 14 to 18 inches, but I do it real good. And but still, to this day, you will not find me outside without a shirt.
So many things that I think about. So, I think that's really important to highlight that it's not really about the weight in terms of the weight, but the weight in terms of health. And so I think, it's important to not focus on the numbers. Like, for instance, my kids, I don't tell them that there's a weight that's right, and I don't want people to think that the issue is that you had weight, but it's weight related to health. But the problem is that we created in you in a young age a body dysmorphia. I will tell you that I have body dysmorphic syndrome as well. I remember as a kid, my mom used to say, well, you've just gotten so tall and fat. And so I didn't know what was to be worse. I wasn't supposed to be tall, or I wasn't supposed to be fat. And so I remember it was like 16 years old, and she would just say, you've just become so tall and fat. It didn't help that I became big chested. And so everything kind of came at once. And so, it's very easy to start being, instead of sitting like this, you start sitting like this, and, you start closing up, and then the food feels good. And I get that feeling, and not also then understanding. And I also to this day have a lot of trouble wearing a bathing suit around other people, because there's that sort of, I've just in the back of your mind, it's almost your parents don't realize what they do to you when they say these things like, oh, you're just so tall and fat. So I honestly thought being tall was a bad thing, because I have a little Asian family and a 5-foot tall mother. And I do. She's a 5-foot tall mom. My sister's 5'2", and go figure, I married a 6'4" man. But I'm 5'6", and I thought that was really a bad thing to be tall, which I realize I'm not that tall, but according to my Indian standards, I was like, oh God, I'm tall and fat. Like, I shouldn't be tall and I shouldn't be fat. And in some ways, I think so much of that body dysmorphia lasts us so much of our life. And you said to this day, I don't want to go to the beach without a shirt. And I just feel that's so sad. I definitely have some of that same stuff, but like, how do you get out of that? Right? Like, there's so many stigmas and so many biases that other people have, and their own insecurities and their own weaknesses, that then they impose on us as children. And then because of their own insecurities and their own expectations of what's normal and what's right, and then we take them, and then we have to kind of work through them and figure out who we are outside of that stuff. And how does that happen? Like, how did you become this strong guy that you may not see, but we see? Like, how did that happen?
So the irony for that is, I was raised by very judgmental people who also taught me, when I said earlier petty, it's not really petty, but it is obstinate and it is contrary. Anytime someone has told me I can't, or that I shouldn't, or I reject the idea that another person has the idea to judge me as being less. And that feeling of anger it's fueled by this kind of righteous anger for, all those emotions that I felt. That pain, ironically, is what gave me the strength to tell them, you don't get to do this. You don't get to judge me. Who are you to levy that judgment? If someone is themselves on the borderline of obesity, they should not be judging someone else for being obese. If they, whether they are or not, they shouldn't be judging someone else for being obese, because you don't know their story. You don't know their narrative, their pain, their trauma. When I recognized that, one, I was isolated in my own head, and what I thought people were thinking about me, most of them probably weren't, because they had their own lives to live. Let me say this a different way. I think that people are inherently self-centered. We are self-centric, especially in an individualist society. 9 times out of 10, they're not really focusing on other people. They're focusing on themselves and what they're feeling. Most judgment of other people comes from the thing about a person them are ashamed about within themselves. It's easy to judge somebody for being obese if you are borderline obese, or if you are obese yourself. It is easy to fat shame when you are like that. It is, if you are emotionally insecure, if you feel undesirable, if you feel any of those things, it's easier to judge someone for being other. I think that also
The
comes down
classic
to,
bully, isn't it?
yeah, it's the classic bully. And we see that translated into like every level of our culture, especially here in the South. The less you have introspection, the less self-reflection that you go through, the less you recognize where your pain comes from, and that pain will not be repressed. You think you're controlling it, but that's just because you don't have the tools necessary to recognize how you're lashing out, and that's a lot of it. As far as where that strength came from and how that manifested, it was slowly. If anybody hears this and there's one thing that you take away from today's interview amongst all my tangents and rambling, it would be this: you will never wake up tomorrow being completely different than you are today. You can wake up different. You can wake up differently. You can become something else, but no wall is built overnight. It is one stone on top of another on top of another. I have always said you can't move a mountain. But if you take enough dynamite, you can blow that mountain into tiny little pieces and you can cart it away. And it is so important to recognize that this change comes slowly. And as somebody who struggled with their weight, as somebody who has felt powerless and impotent to change the very flesh that they're written on, you have that power. You have been convinced that you can't change it. Their narrative, their voice, your failures come together and conspire to give you a narrative that you feel powerless to change. And that powerlessness comes from every other failure, comes from every other voice that has ever held you down. You have the ability to change. And part of that comes from changing the internal narrative. As soon as you recognize just because you're big doesn't mean you're less. Just because you're big doesn't mean that people don't want you, that you're not attractive, that you're not valued. My whole life, when I leave a place or when I haven't seen a friend for a long time, I will get text messages, I need Kyler time. I miss you, because my weight is not the deciding factor for my worth and my value. I'm almost 40 and it's taken me to this point to realize that. It's taken me nearly 30 years as a thinking semi-adult to realize I have value. I'm wanted, I'm needed, people desire me. My ex-husband, I will never forget the worst argument we ever had. I was trying to figure out exactly what his type was, because whenever you feel like you're unattractive, why are they with you? Like, you're unattractive. And then he told me that he found Larry the Cable Guy super sexy. I didn't know how to process it. I was in the same category as Larry the Cable Guy.
I may have to Google a picture.
Oh, Google. It will give you context for why I was like, I am in the gay world what's called a bear. I am large and I am furry. And gay men love their anthropomorphization. I don't know. We have too much free time in the closet, so we get creative. But he told me that he found Larry the Cable Guy super attractive. My current partner also finds Larry the Cable Guy super attractive. Now I am able to process he likes huskier guys, chest hair, and all that. And I've accepted the fact that I'm always going to be a bear. I'm a big guy. I'm 6'2". I'm built like a wall. And the imposingness only gets more imposing as the muscle comes on and the fat comes off. It hasn't changed the fact that I'm a giant square of a human being. But when I heard that, I was like, well, we can never break up, because obviously I'm never going to find anybody else that will find me attractive. There's something broken in you, and that is why you love me. It was easier to assume that he was
Wow.
broken than I could be attractive. Think about what goes into that. Think about the
Yeah, wow.
self-hate and the judgment. And that relationship really helped me turn a corner in recognizing I could be more. I could hope to be more. By the end of that relationship, I had grown a lot. And then like COVID provided a time. So in the last 10 years, I had been part of a seminary program. I had been initiated into priesthood. I'd worked very, very hard for that. I ran a temple in Florida. I was a massage therapist for 12 years. I eventually left that as my primary job. I went to work for a state university, stopped a few relationships. All of that cluttered my brain. I'd learned all these lessons. All this stuff had happened. And then COVID hit. And COVID took me out of this life of distractions that I had built for myself. And it forced me to be still and be quiet. Hard to imagine me quiet, but it does happen on occasion. And it forced me to integrate. It forced me to truly sit with all the changes in my life. And how did I feel about that? And how did I feel about me? And I realized I am not the same person I was 10 years ago. I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago. My closest relationships had narrowed, and those connections had attenuated, and I built new relationships. And today I sit here better than I was before. The Trevor Project, you're probably familiar with the Trevor Project. It gets better.
Why don't you comment a little bit on that?
So the Trevor Project is it's an initiative to remind kids, because the suicide rate amongst LGBTQ teens is so high. It's so high. I mean, being a teenager in any culture is awful. You are a raging ball of hormones and angst, and you're swimming in a sea at storm, and you're just trying to keep your head above water. And those secrets that gender identity, gender dysphoria, the fact that you may like the same sex, or that you're wearing the wrong skin. I mean, I was heavy and I was wearing the wrong skin. My outside didn't match my inside. I can't imagine that if physically and sexually, like your body is the wrong gender. I don't know how to process that. Like, I would like to think that if that had been the card I had been dealt, that I would rise above. I certainly think if I had that level of challenge, I would be perhaps stronger, or I would have been broken by it. And our society certainly does us very few favors. Trans folk are, to my mind, they should be celebrated. They should be supported and encouraged. The idea that there's something inherently wrong about them, I reject so viscerally. But the Trevor Project, I have more tangents than a geometry class. The Trevor Project was an initiative to help combat that, and it's generally everywhere in popular culture you can see it. You can certainly find links to it, but their slogan, which was an incredible slogan, was "It gets better," and it does. It gets better. It gets better often when you make the decision that it's going to get better, and you remove yourself from unhealthy environments and unhealthy relationships, which can be difficult, because when you're a teenager, it's not like you can just, you know what, eat, pray, love, I'm going to go follow my bliss. No, you're 14, you're going to stay at home. Like, you have to make it through that. But it helped. When I first heard their very first campaign, I cried. I cried. And again, crying when you're this coloration is an inherently traumatic experience, because you look like you're having a cardiac event. Like,
Tyler, I'm blown away by this conversation for so many reasons. It's so beautiful I know you for years, but to re-know you and to learn all these parts of you that maybe I didn't understand or know fully, it's beautiful. And I admire so many things about you and your journey. And I think that that's really important to know, because you are a really special person. And I truly mean that. And I love all the positive things, like in this, you're such an inherently positive person that we see. You give off so much positivity, and so many things you've said throughout this time, you've said are really positive, right? Like, you've come out when saying, you talked about I love the Trevor Project, and I love the conversation about gay pride, and I love the conversation about loving yourself and learning to say, it was really probably, I just love what you said. It's like, it's going to start getting better when you decide that it's just going to get better. And it's almost like that turn of thought in your head that you can do this and it will change. And that's really incredible, because that's what I want people to take away from you is you've had so many hurdles in your life and you've overcome them, and you're a beautiful, positive, amazing person. And look what you've done with your life. You were a guy who maybe didn't do well in school and maybe was going to become the sort of quintessential, Central Florida redneck. You could have become that, but right, you didn't become that. You decided differently for yourself. You chose to embrace being gay, embrace your body. You chose to go beyond, say, well, I wasn't ready for school at that time, but now I am. And you continue to learn every day. And you are probably the most well-read person I know, about so many things, about so eclectic. And that's really so special to see. And now you're going on and you're getting, you've decided that getting a degree is not enough. You want a PhD, and I love that sort of continued growth and wanting to learn and be better, and not even be better isn't the right word, but just to continue to satisfy those parts of you that maybe you couldn't before. And that takes a lot of sort of love of self to know that you can grow in that way, and that's really special.
Thank you. I'm really glad that I drank like 3 cups of coffee, so I'm too dehydrated to actually cry on camera. And thank heavens for yellow lighting, because it neutralizes the red that's happening. Thank you, Monica. I can honestly say that you have been a wonderful inclusion in my life. You have been such a touchstone of ideas and support. I know I see your expression. It's, how did we ever have conversations without Zoom reflecting what we're looking like back? I didn't realize that my face was really expressive until that. And it's been very helpful in not telling people what I think in the moment. And that's saved a couple jobs. But no, you have been wonderful. When I speak with you, I've always found so much presence and intention and empathy and compassion there. It's been very helpful, and relationships like the one with you have helped me to grow. And sometimes, especially for the folks out there who may be listening, sometimes all it takes is that one relationship. You never know the impact. I know you certainly have no idea the impact that you've had on me in my life. Even when you've argued with me, get out of Gainesville. I'm like, but I want to stay in Gainesville. But get out of Gainesville. The impact that you have, we can't see in that moment, because sometimes all a person is doing to us is they're arguing back at us or they're rejecting. But you don't know what you've incepted. You don't know what idea you have planted the seed, and it takes years for seeds to grow. That's the thing. We think that if we don't get an immediate reaction, but just like sitting on that beach, learning shame took years to manifest into morbid obesity. It was nurtured every day by criticism and judgment and all that. The same can be said for hope and a brighter future. I was born in 1983. When someone asked me my last 2 years of high school, do you think, gay marriage will ever be a thing? And I'm like, not in my lifetime. It is federally recognized, folks. I can marry the man of my dreams, and whether he's aware of it or not, I plan to.
Yay!
It's like, I haven't been planning a ceremony. What? But it takes time. But sometimes it's like waiting at the doctor's office. You've only been there 5 minutes. It feels like 3 hours, but you've only been there 5 minutes, and then you're in. That's the thing. These are difficult times. They've been difficult times. And for people who carry the burdens that so many of us carry, that time seems interminable. But there is hope. There is a way forward. It does get better. Please don't sue me, Trevor Project. But no,
just a step at a time. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's just slowly. You can't get to the end before you start at the beginning. You have to take a step you got to start. You got to take steps, and some of them are harder to take than others. But it's going to be okay. If anything, I want people to take away is that feeling, which is that it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. We're all going to be okay. It may suck at moments, but surround yourself with people that do love you and that you can love, that can nurture you and who can support the crazy and also and also help you through a lot of your hurdles and your secrets. And I think you've done that for sure. And I think that that's the positive and hope that I want for everyone. And, just surround yourself and remember that none of us have gotten where we've gotten in one day. I mean, we've taken time and we've had so many heartaches and we've had so many things that have been, it's this, I've said this recently, and I'll say it again. It's, I had said to somebody recently, I just wish I knew how it ended, like I wish I just knew how I could, so then I would know what to do. And, they laughed at me. And of course I laughed at myself because I realized how foolish that is. But their thought and what they said to me was, you don't really need to know how the road ends. You just have to know about the piece right in front of you. Right. And it doesn't really matter about the end, because this is the most important. If you focus on that, that's all you do. So you focus on that. You focus on how am I going to get through today, or how am I going to make myself a little bit better today, or how am I going to eat a little bit less, or love myself a little bit more, or appreciate who I am more, just that little bit. And then that's it. That's all you got to focus on. And then slowly you learn more of the road. And that same person that I was talking to said something beautiful. And he said, it's not, if I had known what the road looked like when I started, I probably wouldn't have gone on the road. And so the point is to just focus on now, and it doesn't matter what the end of the road looks like. We'll just focus on today, get today better, and then slowly, because I bet the guy that you were at 9 years old or 14 years old would not expect that you would be in a very nurturing, loving relationship with a man. You're on your way to get a PhD. You're strong and healthy. I mean, that guy would never see this guy. And I think that advice to your younger self was good, that you just, a little bit better every day, a little bit more, and it does get better, and you can do this.
Absolutely. And there is one thing that I would like to add in there too,
Yeah.
if possible. I don't know where we are
Yeah,
on time,
yeah.
but it gets better. The message of positivity and hope is so important, but that is also not to diminish the point of pain that you're in. And I have a bit of a philosophy for that. If it hurts in that moment, that is okay. Part of life is pain. The important thing, and this is I think a quintessential part of me becoming who I was. If I'm going to hurt, if I have to pay that heavy coin of pain, it's just like when you go to a car dealership. If you're going to pay, you get the best bang for your buck. If I have to hurt, if I have to pay that heavy, awful coin, I'm going to carry as much growth, as much knowledge of myself and what happened, right and wrong, away from this experience as I can. Because one, I don't like to repeat mistakes. I don't like to repeat pain. And an unlearned lesson will come around again. So every opportunity for pain, every moment of agony that you may go through is something that can forge you into something better. And that's the foundation stone for how it gets better. You have to learn from that pain. Otherwise, it'll come back.
Beautiful. Truly an honor to have you, Kyler, on this podcast. Thank you for being such a warm light in my life, and hopefully in many people's lives who listen to you. I truly, I marvel at you and who you are and who you've become. And I just want to thank you for being on this show today.
Thank you, Monica. I'm truly honored.